Chapter 11. Natalie. Natalie Morgan closed her eyes and tried to sit back against the armored truck's rear seat. The bench seats in the Storm Chaser were, like the seats in most vehicles, designed for people of average stature. She made a mental note to look into smaller ones as she tried once more to lean back without her feet rising off the floor like a child. As she tried to drift off, she counted the number of hours' sleep she had managed to get in the last few days. The answer was 4, but she was so tired she wasn't sure. Her phone buzzed. She opened her eyes, popped the glasses down from their perch atop her forehead, and glanced down. It said Cordonnier signal lost. Instantly awake, she snatched it up and tapped furiously with her thumbs. Fate never turned off his tracking device. Natalie had several clients before Fate, and they all turned off the GPS tracking devices from time to time. Privacy is a precious thing to the wealthiest people in the world. But that had never happened with Fate. The tracking app's history tab showed that he had an elevated heart rate over the past hour, confirming her worst fear, that he had been kidnapped. "Damn! Not this time!" she said through gritted teeth. Natalie used her phone to tap on the glass, separating her from the driver. He slid the window down. "Natalie, please, use the intercom. You're going to break the glass," he complained. "Right. Sorry. Pull over as soon as you can find an open space like a soccer field or a big parking lot." "What? Why?" he asked. Natalie was already on her next task and ignored him. She copied the last location from the app and dropped a pin on her map. "What's he doing out in northwest South Dakota?" she muttered, and sighed as she heard her own words. "He probably just likes the way it sounds." 2 hours and 3 aircraft later, Natalie and a 4-man team of private security were speeding through residential streets in a black SUV. Ryan slowly came back to consciousness for the second time in one day. Also, for the second time that day, his short-term memory had been wiped, and he had no idea where he was or why he was there. Ryan gradually realized that Madison was alternately slapping and shaking him. "Wake up! Hey!" he said, and blocked another slap. "What time is it? What's wrong? Where are we?" "I don't know. I just woke up in the next room, but I think Daniel is in trouble." She held up an orange notebook. "I can hear him with my earring, but he won't respond. I can also hear 2 men, but I don't recognize either one of them. Do you remember how we got here?" Ryan shook his head, rubbed his eyes, and stood. "This place is pretty grim. Let's get out of here and find him." She helped Ryan to his feet and led him into the hallway. "I want to look around in here first," she said at the doorway to the other room. "This is where I woke up, and Daniel's notebook was in here." The door had been blown off its hinges by the exit of the cutter as air rushed in to fill the void previously occupied by the machine. "What happened in here?" he asked, examining the door. A thick layer of dust had been tossed into the air and had not yet settled back down. He coughed and pulled his shirt up over his nose to avoid breathing more of the thick cloud. "No idea." "There's a pile of junk over there," she gestured to the rusty things in the corner. "And the notebook was here on the floor. It describes a machine that can cut the dimension lines." "The what?" She was about to describe the lines and Daniel's theory to Ryan when Daniel's voice became clearer and louder. He had pulled his earring off the wall of the cutter and returned it to his ear. "Daniel? Where are you?" He didn't respond. She growled in frustration. Ryan was examining the tools on the small workbench. "There's nothing here. Should we check the rest of the house? He can't be far." "Already did. It's empty." "Very creepy, but empty. I checked outside, too. I don't know how long we were out, but it's already late afternoon. Your Jeep's in the driveway. And there's a horse, too. Don't know what's up with that." She turned away to shout again. "Daniel, answer me!" Ryan winced. You said you could hear him? What's he saying? Shh. It's hard to hear. She cupped her hand over her ear to listen. I think he said something about the moon, and then someone in a deep voice called him boy. The moon. What does that mean? Asked Ryan as he tried to pull Madison toward the door. Doesn't make any sense. It must be too loud there for him to hear me. Daniel, she shouted again. 4 more blocks and then left, Natalie shouted from the back seat as the engine roared. The SUV hit a pothole, causing her to readjust the tactical helmet that was several sizes too large for her head. The team leader, Jim Danziger, wouldn't let her into the car until she put it on, along with an equally ill-fitting jacket. And remember, non-lethals only until I can assess the situation, she shouted and squirmed between the 2 large men on either side of her. There isn't going to be any assessing, Natalie. It'll be over before you get out of the car, Danziger shouted from the front seat. No way, Jim. I'm out front on this one. Damn it, Natalie. We aren't going to kill anybody that doesn't need killing. You're staying in the car. We'll see about that, she muttered, and passed the tablet around one more time. It displayed an image of Lafayette in his white suit and Van Dyke-style white goatee. So, we're looking for a French guy with a British accent who looks like Mark Twain, the driver said, and grinned. I thought he looked more like Buffalo Bill, said the man to Natalie's right, triggering a chorus of laughter. Danziger glared at him, and he coughed away the smile. Turn here, she shouted and pointed. The driver swerved left without slowing. It's the one at the end with boards on the windows. Well, that settles one thing, Danziger said, when he saw the state of the rundown old house. He's not just visiting a girlfriend, not in a place like that. The SUV sped into the driveway and came to a sideways stop behind Ryan's Jeep, blocking it in. Game faces! Weapons check! Danziger waited for the clicks and clacks of the weapons to stop. Go! They emptied out into the last light of dusk. The 2 men in the back seat on either side of Natalie hit their door locks and slammed the doors shut before she could slide out. They ran for the front door. Danziger and the driver headed for the rear of the house. Natalie pulled the door handle, but it refused to budge. The door locks also defied her. She growled and squirmed into the front seat. The driver's door opened for her, and she ran to the backyard. Danziger kicked in the back door and tossed something into the kitchen. He twisted back to shield his eyes just as Natalie sped past them into the house. Damn it, Natalie, he said, and they ran after her. The flashbang went off as soon as they were inside. Natalie had already run through the kitchen and into the living room. Madison and Ryan were on their way up the stairs when the bang startled them. They jogged the rest of the way up to the kitchen and surprised Danziger, who was dazed by his own flashbang. Natalie returned at a run and tried to tackle Ryan without any success. Danziger could see well enough to pull Natalie off Ryan's back. He let his men subdue their 2 suspects, and they took Madison and Ryan back down into the basement. One more time, Natalie said calmly. Where is Mr. Cordonnier? Where's my brother? Demanded Madison angrily. She squirmed against the zip ties holding her to the folding chair. We don't know anybody named Cordonnier, insisted Ryan, and you can't hold us here. We have rights. Oh, my God! Madison whimpered and looked at Ryan in terror. What is it? Asked Ryan with a worried look. I just heard an explosion. Tears filled her eyes, and she leaned forward. Danielle! She screamed so loud, her voice broke into shreds at the end. Natalie raised both eyebrows and looked around at the nearly empty room. She stepped over to Ryan and whispered, Is she on some kind of prescription medication? I told you. Her brother is missing, and that's all we know. His name's Daniel, and he's 10 years old. Natalie glanced at Danziger, who had been silently observing from the doorway. She nodded sideways, and they stepped out into the hall. "What do you think?" she asked. "The girl's as crazy as a pet coon, but I don't think they know anything. They're not players, that's for sure. I have my men interviewing neighbors. Nothing so far. Most of the other houses are empty. The only one who came to the door said he saw a bald Amish guy with a long grey beard driving a horse and buggy yesterday, but nobody else. As soon as they check the neighbors on the other side, we should go. There's nothing here." Natalie had been nodding and chewing her lower lip. "So we got nothing." Danziger shrugged, and they returned to the room. "Madison?" Daniel's voice squeaked out of the tiny device too low for anyone but Madison to hear. "Oh my God, Daniel, are you all right? Where are you?" she screamed. She was beginning to lose her voice. Madison leaned toward Ryan as far as the restraints would allow. Ryan leaned as well, placing his right ear over her left earlobe and the tiny device. "I can hear him," said Ryan, excited. Natalie observed this odd behavior and separated them. She noticed the earring and took it. Madison tried to scream, but her voice had finally given up completely. Natalie held the earring to her ear, then in front of her mouth, and shouted. "It's for you," said Daniel with some amusement. He removed his earring and offered it to Fate, who accepted it with a puzzled expression. They had ducked under the crest of one of the sand dunes too far from the cutter for Vogel to hear them. The wind had gone still enough that they could hear the voices coming from the earring. "It's also a communications device," explained Daniel. Fate took the earring and spoke into it. "Hello?" It made no audible sound. He held it closer to his ear and heard Natalie speaking faster than he had ever heard before. He listened and waited for a pause, guessing that speaking and listening at the same time would be as difficult for her as it was for him. She finished with, "So, where are you?" "Natalie, it's so good to hear from you. How have you been? Never mind. These things are a bit too difficult for proper conversation. I'm with my new friend Daniel. We are safe for the moment, but we could use some assistance from you at some point if it's not too much trouble. As to where we are, that's a bit trickier." He glanced around the dark and desolate landscape illuminated only by the crescent moon. "We seem to be on another world, or perhaps it's the same world in another universe. I cannot explain it further with any confidence except to say you will not be able to reach us with conventional methods. I assume you are in contact with Daniel's sister. If we let them put their heads together, they may come up with a solution. I'll stop talking now. Did you get all of that?" Natalie nearly dropped the earring, but managed to get out. "Roger that. Stand by," which earned a grin from Danziger. "Cut them loose," she said, and added, "Please, Jim." He produced a pair of wire cutters from a pocket and snipped the plastic restraints. Natalie offered the earring to Madison, who snatched it as soon as her bonds were cut. She tried to speak, but it came out as a whisper. She handed it to Ryan, who began an awkward conversation, relaying what Daniel was saying. Danziger's radio crackled. He stepped into the hallway but returned quickly, still speaking into his earpiece. "Wrap it up. We're Oscar Mike." He addressed the room. "We need to leave. Now. 2 dead bodies in the neighbor's house. Wipe down anything you touched." He was already prodding Natalie toward the door. They quickly made their way into the backyard. Ryan jogged over to his jeep. Madison and Natalie were right behind him, and Danziger brought up the rear, wiping fingerprints as he went. "Is there a secure place we can use?" Natalie asked Ryan. "Yes, we can go to my workshop." "I'm coming with you," she said, and jumped up into the back of the jeep. She noticed that her back was against the seat, and her feet were still touching the floor. Natalie wanted to smile at that, but couldn't quite manage it. "No, no, no," Danziger said. "You're my responsibility." "Then get in or keep up," she said. Danziger eyed the jeep's tiny rear seat. We'll follow. He jogged back to the SUV, where the rest of his team was already waiting beside open doors. As he got in and pulled the door closed, they did the same in a synchronized movement. "Get in! Let's go!" Natalie shouted at Ryan, who was still standing beside his Jeep and staring at the house next door. "There are dead people over there," he whispered. "That's right, and you're going to get to explain it to the police if we don't get going." That broke the spell. He jumped in and fastened his seatbelt. Madison was likewise transfixed by the horse in the backyard. "What about the horse?" she complained. "We can't just leave her here." "We'll make an anonymous call," he said, and started the Jeep. "The cops will take care of her."